Okay, so we're going to continue on with our problem-solving method. We have just talked about step 1, which is define and analyze. It has 2 subparts, defining the problem, analyzing the problem, and then within those 2 subparts there are several other subparts. So step 1 actually consists of 5 little baby steps. We're going to talk about step 2, establishing criteria, not because you need to include it in your wiki page, but because we'll be using this part at our face-to-face meeting. So let's talk about criteria and what is criteria and how to establish it. Criteria consists of the standards by which we use to judge all possible solutions. The criteria lets you know what you're looking for in a good solution. So basically, when I give you an assignment, I say to you, here's the criteria for an A. Here's the criteria for a B. So when you give me your quote work or your solution, I'm going to judge that solution against the criteria I set up ahead of time to see what grade you've earned. Probably a better example that students can relate to is if you are dating somebody, you should have a list of criteria for that person in whom you want to date. Before you start dating, you say to yourself, I want to date somebody that has a job. I want to date somebody that is good looking. I want to date somebody that is honest and treats me well. This would be a list of your criteria, standards by which you will judge all possible people to go on dates with. The overall philosophy is if somebody does not meet your list of criteria, then you shouldn't date them. So for us, we're going to establish a list of criteria for your problem, and then when we come up with possible solutions later on, we'll come back and we'll compare it against the criteria. Now, as you can see here, it says note, I will provide the group with the criteria at the face-to-face meeting. So this is not information that you need to put in your wiki page, but it is information that will help you at our face-to-face meeting. The overall example here, the criteria is like a blueprint for a home. It tells you what you are looking for in a good solution. You compare any possible solutions to the criteria to determine if they will meet the group's needs. So if I was searching to purchase a new home, I would have my list of criteria, perhaps a big yard, a big kitchen, needs to cost less than $200,000. That's my blueprint. It's describing for me what my house should look like. Under the idea of criteria, again, this is not in the book, but we want to identify the fact that there are 2 types of criteria. One, value criteria, and the second one is practical criteria. Value criteria is that list of standards that are very subjective. It's very intangible, very hard to measure whether or not a possible solution meets that criteria or not. In our dating example, to say somebody should have a good sense of humor would be a value criterion, because people are going to differ as to whether or not they think somebody has a good sense of humor. And that's what it means by people do not usually agree upon whether a possible solution meets the value criteria, because it is subjective. It varies from person to person. If we said the person we are dating should be good looking, then good looking is a value criteria. The standard is very subjective. Who is good looking to one person may not be good looking to another person. In our traffic example, a value criterion would be our solution to fixing traffic should be aesthetically pleasing, that we don't get to tear up the roads and the environment and the parks to make our traffic problem better. Conversely, the second type of criteria is practical criteria. Practical criteria are the standards that we have set up ahead of time that are very objective, very tangible, usually numerically driven, data-based. It is easy for our group members to decide together whether a possible solution meets the practical criteria. So in our dating example, if I said that somebody needed to have a job, it's very tangible for that person to prove to me that they have a job. And it would be easy for all my family members to agree, yes, this person meets that standard. Show me the paycheck, bam. It's proof that they have a job. We're not going to argue over that compared to the value criteria as to whether or not the person is good looking or has a good sense of humor. For our traffic issue, the practical criteria would be the solution should not cost more than $10 million. If somebody comes up and says they want to build a tollway and it's going to cost $15 million, then the whole group can easily decide, no, 15 million is more than 10 million, so we cannot use that possible solution. So again, it's important to understand what criteria is. Although you are not responsible for it in your wiki page, you will just be using it at the face-to-face meeting. So let's stop here, and we'll do part 3 as another video on brainstorming.